This video is sponsored by Kinguin, more on them later. Oh wow, do we overhype video games a bit these days. We're all guilty of it. A game can't just be decent or a good time, it has to be the best thing we've ever played ever, or the most exciting upcoming game that's gonna solve every problem we've ever had. 2023 has been such a standout year for new video games that it's very easy to agree with that idea because, yeah, a lot of games that came out this year have been amazing, and believe me, we'll get to those before the year's out. But damn, when games fall short of expectation, it can be pretty devastating, and we've had a huge number of those too this year. So before we get into the best and worst that 2023 had to offer, how about that weird middle ground where games aren't quite as good as they should have been? That sounds like a fine idea to me. And you know I gotta do it because we're getting pretty close to Christmas, so hopefully it helps you pick out the not disappointing games. Since Christmas is knocking at the door, you might be interested to hear about today's sponsors, Kinguin, which is just the best place to go for buying games at a discounted price. They've got over 200,000 offers, and at the moment they've got new offers every day until Christmas Eve, so it's worth checking back often. Seriously, it's like an advent calendar, it's amazing. It's super easy to add licensed keys and check out safely, and if you've got any problems of any kind, you can always check in with Kinguin's 24/7 customer service team. I've got my own special promo code that gives you a 14% discount on all purchases, and I'm sure you'll be able to get some sweet goodies with that. So if you fancy picking up some awesome games for a cheap price this Christmas, make sure you head over to kinguin.in/Luigi and use the promo code Luigi in all caps for that juicy 14% site-wide discount. That link is also in this video's description if you don't fancy typing all of that out. Thank you again to Kinguin for sponsoring this video. Anyway, games that gave me the big sad. I was unsure what to call this video since it's pretty much here to occupy some of those games that came out this year that basically ran right through me. And so I guess you've got a dilemma about whether I should be disappointed or just underwhelmed. Call of Duty for the last 5 to 10 years has traditionally been painfully underwhelming to the point of flying under the radar of any of my end of year videos. And so in a way, this video is all about finding a chance to talk about how meh this franchise is at the moment. Except 2023 saw an exciting new development for Call of Duty. Not only is the new Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 spectacularly underwhelming, it's actually just really kinda bad. Which I suppose is a little appropriate since the original Modern Warfare 3 wasn't met with quite the same fanfare as the previous two stunning video games, you know, back when these games were really good. But 2023's Modern Warfare has taken this franchise to places that it has never been, and frankly it should never have gone to. Call of Duty has eventually suffered big time from being a yearly franchise, but Activision were always able to make it work by having multiple dev teams on a 3-year cycle so that each yearly release had actually had some dev time and effort behind it. This didn't happen with MW3, and it only just about happened with Vanguard before it, and shockingly, when a dev team is only about 16 months to make a big boy AAA first-person shooter, corners are cut and content is recycled haphazardly from Warzone. The campaign is an insult to the name Modern Warfare, and the multiplayer is surprisingly terrible too. It's the lowest rated mainline Call of Duty game of all time, and you know, you can feel every ounce of that. Never thought we could stoop so low. So obviously this isn't a list of the worst games of the year, although I'd be lying if I said that there was absolutely no crossover between the two topics. The order, however, may be different owing to expectations that weren't fulfilled, and if I didn't anticipate a game, it'd be hard to be disappointed. I wasn't too excited about The Walking Dead Destinies, but it's a recognized brand that has been responsible for some dynamite video games with even better storytelling, but my word, is there a drop-off with this one. Destinies is trying to tie into the early seasons of the TV show, which would have been interesting more than a decade ago, but I suppose that's appropriate because it looks and plays like something that came out in the early 2010s. And it wouldn't have been great even then. I've played enough zombie games to tell you that this is just not working in any way. The zombies here are some of the most useless and least threatening zombies I've ever seen in my entire life. They pose no challenge or relevance to any scenario in this game and are little more than shooting practice. The only conflict here is all the glitches and bugs that do everything in their power to block your progress and force that struggle of surviving in a post-apocalyptic world onto you in a unique way. I'm not super sad about this, but I do wish for a decent Walking Dead game again. Frankly, what do you expect from the same publishers who helped out with big rigs over-the-road racing? Suddenly, everything makes sense. A lot was written and said about Atomic Heart this year. There were a ton of angles to approach it from, ranging from the harmless notion that this game was looking to be a spiritual successor to the BioShock games, to the incredibly interesting idea that this game is peddling pro-Russian propaganda, and that its sales are directly supporting the Russian war effort, so they can spend more time losing to Ukraine. However you feel about Atomic Heart, at the end of the day, there's a game to play here, and while it's so clearly inspired by BioShock, that's where the good stuff kinda dries up. Atomic Heart plays like a hazy recollection of what these kind of games used to be like. The surface level issues are the usual frame drops and poor optimization, which is doubly annoying since we're going for a sweeping open world setting, and you tend to notice them more when you've got all of this world to explore. The deeper problems come from actually making a game that matches up to the concept of a BioShock successor, and the combat can't keep up with the action, and the open world feels like empty filler until the next somewhat interesting part of the game. Ultimately, Atomic Heart showed promise, but couldn't get it over the line. But it's easy to play with one hand. Ain't it fun to have new Crash Bandicoot games again? For sure, Crash Team Rumble wasn't great and disappointing when it comes to providing a positive bandicooting experience, but it wasn't that long ago at all that we were in the fucking weeds for new Crash games. So even though Crash Team Rumble is a severely underwhelming party game that somehow drains away most, if not all, the fun that you could have playing this with other humans, in a way, I'm happy we got anything at all. One of the biggest red flags with this game is that Toys for Bob, who had done some stunning work with the Crash Bandicoot remakes and the Spyro remakes, yeah, they've been moved by Activision to help out with Call of Duty now, and yeah, I don't think that helped Team Rumble at all. There's a few cool ideas in here, and I like how this game is able to use existing mechanics in new ways, but it's a party game at the end of the day, and in order to provide a sense of depth of gameplay, there's a lot of repetition here. And then you factor in a battle pass and some intrusive monetization, and my enthusiasm for anything this game is trying to do has been snuffed out like a candle. Not gonna lie, I'm not feeling great about the prospect of future Crash Bandicoot games. Don't kill my boy again. I'll make this next one fairly quick because I reckon that my primarily American audience doesn't care too much about what EA has done with FIFA this year. A long story short is that EA decided to cut ties with FIFA after a disagreement over the licensing, and so it went into 2023 with its flagship footballing franchise under a completely new identity. EA FC 24 is where we are nowadays, and it was a real bona fide chance for EA to lay down a marker and prove to the world that not only are they better off without FIFA, but they deserve to be the head honcho in this particular market. Oh, that didn't happen. Nothing even close to that happened, as instead we got this bizarrely reheated version of last year's FIFA, but with different branding and a handful of new physics features that really don't mesh well together. FIFA always had this problem with scripting, where games would kind of fall down this predetermined path, and if the powers that be decided that you're going to concede a goal, then fuck! It's gonna happen one way or another, and the one way is usually fucking stupid. FC 24 is this on steroids, where attackers can barrel their way through tackles and pace only matters when the game really wants it to matter. So you have a fundamentally unchanged game despite the new branding, but the new stuff is stupid and unnecessary. Even the online stuff like Ultimate Team is broken and close to unplayable. FIFA, the organization, have stated that they will still be pushing forward with an EA-less FIFA game, and damn, it's an open goal at the moment. Frankly, EA could use some competition. Another year, another live service game that struggled big time with server issues at launch, but I gotta say that I didn't expect that game to be Payday 3. Now that should have gone a lot better, and considering that this has been 10 years in the making and we have had countless stories of how not to set up an online only game, this should have turned out significantly better than this. Honestly, if you are sitting on a sequel for a decade to a game that has done pretty well for itself in that time, you'd only push forward with that sequel if you were ready to make the game and had thought of enough improvements that warranted the existence of a Payday 3, instead of this bullshit. Because at the end of the day, which is roughly when the servers started working and you were allowed to make use of the online-only game that you paid money for, Payday 3 was so mediocre at launch that the server issues were, ironically, doing a surprisingly good job of deflecting attention away from how bare-bones the content is. I know it's a live service game that will receive numerous updates and patches in its lifetime that will put it at least in the same ballpark legacy-wise as Payday 2, but we've really got to start releasing these games in better condition. You're putting an awful lot of faith in the resilience of existing fan bases to put up with this kind of shit for long enough for the game to get up to scratch. It's almost criminal, which is almost kinda perfect. I'll tell you this for a fact, and as some way of making the comment section not hate me, Starfield is the best game on this list. For the most part, given Bethesda's worrying recent track record, the fact that Starfield is mostly not so glitchy and, you know, playable at launch is frankly a minor miracle, and a successful vaulting of the biggest hurdle that this game was facing, but can we say with any real honesty that this is what we were expecting from Starfield? Can anyone who played it look back on their time with it and be happy that the best they can think is, thank God it wasn't fucking terrible? I think it deserves a higher standard of appreciation and evaluation, and given that Starfield is the start of what Bethesda would hope is a long, flourishing franchise, it really should have been a lot better. I wonder how much of this is down to overhyping and the fresh optimism that comes with a new franchise after years of mediocrity, but if anything, it highlights all of the holes in Bethesda's design philosophy. There were comparisons to the early days of No Man's Sky with all of the procedural generation of planets, which thankfully Starfield manages to avoid, but at the same time I can't shake the feeling that everything you do in this game doesn't really mean anything. There's a lot to do for sure, but the gameplay loop leaves me feeling way too hollow for me to want to do more quests and find more things to do. But hey, maybe Starfield 2 will be better, if they can hold off on the glitches. Is it possible for me to feel disappointment for anything Metal Gear these days? Well, I didn't think so, but to be fair, we mercifully haven't had to worry about a new Metal Gear game since that stupid zombie game came out years ago. But I think Konami think that it's been long enough and that maybe the public have forgotten that this is a tainted brand now? Well, anyway, we had Volume 1 of the Master Collection to mess around with this year, and I am truly impressed how Konami have been able to disappoint when expectations had tunneled their way towards the center of the earth. You better believe there's a The Onion headline for that. I mean, fucking come on now, what are we doing here? Are we seriously repackaging the HD remasters that came out a decade ago, and also managing to completely botch the one remaster that wasn't mostly done for them? Like, it's egregious enough that Konami removed the HD collection from digital storefronts a few years ago over apparent licensing issues, which just so happens to make the existence of a new HD collection more valuable. But to include a version of Metal Gear Solid 1 that is so poorly optimized that it doesn't run at the right frequency, so the frame rate chugs during even the calmest scenarios, that is such an amateur move. Like, this problem's been solved for like 25 years, what are you doing? It's a hard game to play, and that makes for a disappointing Master Collection, and you've even managed to give me a version of Snake Eater this year that is one of the worst versions I've ever played. You want to talk about expectations? You've given me my favorite game of all time in a terrible version. It's like sitting down to your favorite meal, but someone smeared shit all over it. Like, I know we've got that Delta remake thing coming up at some point, but I just can't get over how fumbled this collection is. The ideas of these clowns remaking MGS3 from the ground up. Oh, it's gonna be so painful. I didn't even consider that Cities Skylines would ever have a sequel. I have poured an unreasonably large amount of time into this game. Like, I have responsibilities and people to look after and videos to edit, and yet I always find time, probably when I shouldn't, to boot up some City Skylines and try my hand at city planning, and the best way to shove a sinkhole up their asses. So yeah, Cities Skylines 2 is a thing now, which is instantly a little worrying, because I feel like the first game is doing just fine on its own, and for there to be a sequel, it has to be either dramatically different or so much better that it couldn't be done with patches or content updates. What do you reckon happened? Okay, so Cities Skylines 2 may end up being amazing, but in 2023, it sure as hell was doing something else. The warning signs were there with all the delays, and when the devs and the publisher were doing everything they could to prepare fans for the eventual release not quite being up to code, the writing wasn't so much on the wall as it was painfully carved into the stone with fingernails. It's a glitchy, buggy mess that ironically puts itself with closer comparisons to 2013 SimCity, with all of those glitches which the original Cities Skyline was made as a reaction to. This style of game is so ethereal and zen that any major problems of optimization snaps you straight back to reality in a really uncomfortable way. This isn't the sort of thing where you can brush these problems under the carpet, and it made for a devastatingly disappointing sequel. But hey, I can still play way too much of the first game. Oh boy, am I fully prepared to take the fattest of L's for going into bat for Forspoken. I was genuinely excited for this game, since it seemed like Square Enix had a cool new property on their hands, but I should have seen the signs, since Balan Wonderworld and Babylon's Fall stunk up the joint for the last 2 years. Forspoken isn't anywhere near as disastrous as those two, but it does continue a worrying trend of Square Enix published games that are so much worse than they should be. Forspoken initially looked like a creative take on a genre that so easily falls into cliches, but any and all early promise that Forspoken laid out went down the toilet as soon as anyone heard the dialogue and the writing. This was the general public's entry point for this game, and honestly the quality of the writing and cadence of the voice acting are equal parts grating, and also has this, like, second-hand embarrassment quality to it. Like, surely no one who worked on this game was trying to do this from the start? It's got unfunny Marvel movie qualities, and Forspoken should have been worth a lot more than an exasperated sigh at some shitty writing. Even away from that though, and Forspoken never embraces its ideas. It's got some cool ideas of magic, but you're given about 5 minutes of all the abilities unlocked before the game ends, and the ability progression in between is an absolute joke. It's trying to have all this style and wow you with funky visuals and writing, but the substance is very lacking, and for a brand new IP to have so few redeeming features when it's trying to be something exciting and interesting, that's just not right. Is it the worst game that came out this year? No, but, you know, that's for another video. And yeah, that's my list of the most disappointing games of 2023. Do you agree, or is there something else you'd have at number 1? Let me know in a comment down below, and if you've enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe for more, and hit that bell for notifications of every new upload. My last video was about ranking Game of the Year nominees, so go watch that, and I also want to thank my top supporters on Patreon, including the Green Scorpion, Scott Riker, and Sarah Malion. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.